Kham raised the pig himself, fed it, kept it, did the whole thing the way his father had taught him, the way you do it when the meal actually means something. When the family came together that December, he made larb the way it was supposed to be made, by hand, with care. The dish everyone waited all year for. Everyone who ate it got sick. Every single one. Not from a restaurant, not from some gas station meat. From the cleanest, most loved plate of food in the room. The one made by the man who would have died before he served his family something dangerous. 3 weeks later, his kidneys were shutting down, and the doctors keeping him alive in the ICU had no idea what was wrong with him. Because the thing that was wrong with him wasn't in his blood the way they kept looking. It had already left his stomach. It was somewhere they weren't trained to look. It was in his muscles, in the muscle around his eyes, in the muscle that pulls his breath in and out. Hundreds of them curled up inside the meat of him, settling in to stay for years. Here's the part that should stop you cold. What did this to Kham is sitting in a fridge somewhere near you right now. It's one of the most common meats on Earth, and the single thing that saves you from it is something almost nobody checks. Start with the table, because the table is the whole point. It's late December, and Kham's house is full. Kids underfoot, too many shoes by the door, 3 generations talking over each other. This is the meal of the year, and the centerpiece is his. Larb, a traditional dish, minced meat tossed with herbs, lime, chili, roasted rice powder. Bright and sharp and alive on the tongue, made the old way, with raw pork, the way his family had made it for as long as anyone could remember. And the pork was his. That was the pride of it. He hadn't bought it shrink-wrapped under fluorescent light. He'd raised the animal himself, on his own land, a boar fattened and slaughtered at home. No middleman, no mystery. He knew exactly where this food came from, which in his mind made it cleaner than anything you could buy. You can feel the logic, and it's good logic. We've all been taught that closer to the source is safer, that homemade beats processed, that the worst thing on your plate is the stuff with a barcode. His nephew was the careful one that day, in the small way that ended up mattering. He didn't love raw meat, never had, so he took his portion and cooked it through before he ate. Got teased for it, probably. The fussy one, ruining good larb. He'd be the only adult at that table who walked away fine. Everyone else ate it the way Kham made it, the way it was meant to be eaten. And every one of them carried something home that night that none of them could see. There were about 29 people there. 7 more took leftovers home to people who hadn't even come. The meal was perfect. That was the problem. For the first few days, nothing. Then it came on like a bad stomach bug. Cramping, nausea, the runs. The kind of thing that rolls through a big family gathering every winter and gets blamed on someone's potato salad. A few of them texted each other about it. Must have been something we ate. Everyone laughed it off. Stomach bugs pass. This one seemed to. The gut symptoms faded, people went back to their lives, and the holiday became just another holiday. That was the trap. Because what they'd eaten hadn't passed at all. It had simply moved on to the next stage, and the next stage didn't live in the stomach. A week or 2 later, the second wave hit, and it looked nothing like the first. Kham's muscles started to ache. Not a workout ache, a deep, wrong, all-over soreness like he'd been beaten in his sleep. Then the fever. Then chills that shook him under the blankets. Then a weakness so heavy he couldn't push himself up out of a chair. And his face began to change. His eyes puffed up, swollen, the skin around them tight and strange, until the man in the mirror didn't quite look like him. He wasn't the only one. Across the family, the same thing was spreading. Aching muscles, fevers, swollen faces. They started comparing notes on the phone, and a cold feeling crept in. Whatever this was, it wasn't a stomach bug. Stomach bugs don't do this. Stomach bugs don't come back 2 weeks later and start eating your strength. Of the 12 who got sick, almost everyone ended up with that same deep muscle pain. Most ran fevers. Most were flattened by the weakness. And a third of them watched their own faces swell up around the eyes. A sign so specific that a doctor who recognized it would have known exactly what they were looking at, if a doctor recognized it. For Kham, it went past sick. The ache became agony. The fever wouldn't break. And then his body started failing in the ways that land you in a hospital fast. He was admitted, and he kept getting worse. His blood pressure dropped. His organs strained. The doctors used the word that means your whole system is tipping over the edge, sepsis. A body-wide crisis, the kind that kills people. Then his kidneys began to shut down. He wasn't the only one in a hospital bed either. Across the family, the severe cases stacked up. Most of the 12 ended up admitted. Some landed in intensive care. 3 out of 4 developed sepsis. More than half had kidneys that started to quit. A couple of them began bleeding inside. Picture it from the doctor's side. A cluster of people, suddenly and catastrophically ill, in full-body crisis. Every instinct says infection, so they go hunting for one. They run the cultures. They check the blood for bacteria, for the usual killers. They treat the sepsis. They support the kidneys. They do everything right for the emergency in front of them. And the source keeps not showing up, because they're looking in the blood for a germ. They are not looking in the muscle for an animal. This is the place where this disease wins. Not because it's unbeatable, because by the time it's this loud, it's wearing a costume, and the costume says sepsis, kidney failure, some aggressive infection nobody can name. The real culprit had been inside these people for weeks, and it had moved somewhere a blood culture will never find it. To understand where it went, you have to follow it from the very first bite. When Kham ate that larb, he wasn't just eating pork, he was eating whatever the pig had been carrying. And that boar's muscle was laced with something microscopic, coiled, and patient. Larvae. Baby worms, each one wound up tight inside a little capsule in the meat, the same way they would one day wind up inside him. You can't see them. You can't taste them. Raw, undercooked, rare in the middle, and they ride in alive. Then they reach your stomach, and your stomach does exactly the wrong favor. The acid that's supposed to be a wall, that dissolves almost everything you swallow, instead melts the capsules open and sets the larvae loose. They move into the wall of your small intestine, and there they grow up. Within days, they're adult worms, mating, and the females start doing the one thing that turns an infection into an invasion. They release their young. Not a few. Hundreds of newborn larvae, each one far too small to see, pouring out into your body. And here's the part people get wrong, the part that makes this so much worse than a stomach worm. They don't stay in the gut. The newborns bore straight through the intestinal wall and into your bloodstream. And then they travel. They ride your own circulation out to every corner of you, carried by the same blood that keeps you alive, and they're hunting for one specific thing: muscle. When a larva finds muscle, it drills into a single muscle cell. And then it does something that sounds invented, but isn't. It reprograms that cell. It turns your own muscle cell into what scientists call a nurse cell, a living pod rebuilt around the worm that feeds it and shelters it. The cell even grows a fresh web of tiny blood vessels around itself, a private supply line, just to keep the parasite comfortable. Then the larva coils up inside, and it waits for years. Now multiply that by hundreds, Hundreds of your muscle cells hijacked and rebuilt into life support for a worm, and they don't scatter at random. They go for the muscles that work the hardest, the ones with the richest blood supply. The tongue, the jaw, the muscles that move your eyes, which is why Kham's face swelled, why his eyes puffed up, and the diaphragm, the muscle under your lungs that pulls every breath you take, that deep, body-wide muscle agony the whole family felt. That was the feeling of being colonized from the inside. So while the doctors were treating sepsis and failing kidneys, the answer was hiding in a number almost nobody thinks to chase. In the blood work of these patients, one type of white blood cell was wildly elevated: eosinophils. They're a part of your immune system that mostly sits quiet until your body senses a parasite. Then they surge. A high eosinophil count is one of the few alarms the body rings specifically for invaders like worms. In this outbreak, more than 8 in 10 of the patients had it. That surge, in person after person who'd all eaten at the same table, is a signature. It says, stop looking for a germ, start looking for a parasite. Someone connected it. The high eosinophils, the cluster of sick people, the one thing they all had in common: a December meal, raw pork, a home-raised pig. The pieces snapped together, and they ran the test no one orders unless they're already suspicious: a blood test for antibodies to trichinella. It came back positive, not sepsis, not a mystery infection, trichinellosis, the muscle worm. 10 of the 12 confirmed in the lab, the rest on the clinical picture. What had been tearing through this family wasn't a bacteria in the blood at all. It was hundreds of tiny worms, the offspring of the ones in the larb, burrowing into the muscle of everyone who'd eaten the meal Kham made with his own hands. The pig he'd raised himself. The thing he was proudest of. That was the front door. There is a treatment, a drug called albendazole that kills the worms, usually paired with steroids to calm the violent inflammation. Most of them got it, but the drug works best early, before the larvae are sealed into muscle behind those nurse cells. By the time you're this sick, a lot of the damage is already done, and some of those guests would carry worms walled into their muscle long after they left the hospital. The thing that saved Kham's life wasn't a cure that erased it. It was that someone finally asked the right question in time. Here's what makes this story so quietly infuriating. This almost never happens anymore. And the reason it almost never happens is the same reason it still does. A century ago, this worm was all through American pork. Thousands of cases a year. People knew about it the way they knew not to grab a hot pan. Then came the rules. What pigs are fed, inspection of commercial meat, the whole unglamorous machinery of food safety, and it worked. It worked so well that trichinellosis nearly vanished. Today, the United States sees only about 15 confirmed cases in a normal year. 15. In a country of hundreds of millions of pork eaters. The system that protects you is so good you've never once had to think about it. But that system has an edge, and past the edge, there's nothing. It covers commercial meat. It does not cover the boar you raised in your own backyard, the deer or bear a hunter brings home, the home-slaughtered pig at a private celebration. The cases left in this country cluster almost entirely out there, in exactly the kind of proud, homemade, know-your-source meal that feels safer than the store. Kham did everything that felt right. He just did all of it in the one blind spot the safety net doesn't reach. And this wasn't a freak. A few years later, in the mountains of North Carolina, around 10 people came down with the same disease after a gathering where they'd eaten undercooked bear. Same worm, same shape of story. There's a cruel wrinkle there too. People believe freezing kills these worms, and for store pork, that's basically true. But the species that lives in wild game, in bear and walrus, shrugs off the cold. You can freeze that meat solid, and the worms inside can still be alive when it thaws. Freezing is a real defense, right up until it quietly isn't. So let's be precise, because the precise part is the part that protects you. Pork is not the enemy. You can eat it your whole life and never come anywhere near this. The system around commercial meat is genuinely good, and the worm is genuinely rare now. None of this is a reason to be scared of your dinner. It's a reason to respect one specific thing: heat. This entire disease, the worms in the gut, the larvae loose in the blood, the nurse cells walled into muscle, the swollen eyes, the failing kidneys, the years of carrying something inside you, all of it is prevented by cooking the meat through, before it ever reaches your stomach. The whole battle is won before the first bite. And the trap is that the people most exposed aren't careless people eating garbage. Often they're the opposite. The hunters, the home cooks, the families who raise their own and cook the old way with pride, the ones who'd never trust a factory but will always trust a tradition. The danger here isn't a lack of care, it's care aimed at the wrong target. So let me give you the one number that would have changed this whole story. If you cook pork, get it to 160 degrees Fahrenheit all the way through. If you cook wild game, bear, boar, anything you or someone you know brought home, take it higher to 165, and don't judge it by color. Pink, brown, none of it tells you whether the worms are dead. The only thing that tells you is a thermometer in the thickest part of the meat. That's the defense. A few dollars of kitchen gear and the patience to check. For game, don't lean on the freezer. Those worms can survive it. Heat is the rule without an exception. And hold on to the thing this whole story turns on, because it's the part people get backwards. The worm doesn't stay down in your stomach where you ate it. It moves out into your muscle and lives there. So if you ever get a strange illness after a meal of undercooked pork or wild game, a stomach upset that fades, and then, a week or two later, deep muscle pain, fever, and your face starting to swell around the eyes, say it out loud to your doctor. Tell them what you ate and when. Ask them straight, could this be a parasite? Ask them to check your eosinophils. Most doctors will go an entire career without seeing a single case of this. They won't be looking for it. You might have to be the one who points. Kham survived. Most of that family did. They were lucky, and they had a treatment, and somebody asked the right question before it was too late. But the man still talks about the meal. Not the hospital, not the kidneys, not the months his body didn't feel like his. The meal, the pride he'd taken in it, the care he'd put into every part of it except the one part that mattered. He raised the pig himself so he'd know exactly what his family was eating. And the one thing he couldn't see was the only thing that could hurt them. The clue was on the plate the whole time. It just needed heat. Don't let the system fail you, and that's where we close the file. This was symptom 0. See you in the next one. Stay healthy.